So our Special Achievement Awardee, Bruce Alberts, is a rare bird. But what type of rare bird? He is clearly not a bald eagle or a crackling goose, but he may be a hybrid of a Pacific loon and a wild turkey. So speaking of turkeys, I think the best way to describe Bruce is to invoke a culinary comparison. Bruce Alberts is the Julia Child of science. Let me explain. Julia Child was a master chef, a best-selling author, skillful teacher, and a passionate educator who touched the lives of millions by helping them discover that cooking can be exciting and fun. A ditto for Bruce Alberts, master biochemist, best-selling author, skillful teacher, and a passionate educator who has touched the lives of millions by helping them discover that science can be exciting and fun. The careers of Julia and Bruce began in much the same way. Both experienced a sudden awakening that changed their lives. Julia fell in love with French food and Bruce with science. Bruce also later fell in love with food, I think. Julia's Epicurean epiphany came at age 35 at a restaurant in Rouen during her first trip to France in 1948. Her first French meal was simple: oysters on the half shell, sole meunière, a green salad, and a chocolate souffle. Until that moment, Julia knew nothing about French cuisine and didn't know the difference between cream of wheat and creme brulee. Her idea of a good meal was a shrimp cocktail, meat and potatoes, and Jell-O for dessert. Now, in a miraculous transformation over the next 12 years, Julia became an authority on French cuisine. In 1961, she published her first book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, which remains in print to this day in its 18th edition. This book is a classic because it demystified French cooking. French baked beans sounded less mysterious to Americans than cassoulet. In 1962, Julia was invited to appear on Boston Public Television to discuss her new book. She arrived at the TV studio with a dozen eggs, a whisk, and a hot plate, and during the interview, she whipped up an on-air omelet. The audience went wild, and the rest is history. And now to Bruce Alberts, our Julia Child of science. Bruce's true calling, like Julia's, came in a flash while standing in front of a classroom in Glencoe, Illinois. When Bruce was 12, his 7th grade science teacher asked him to explain how a television set works. That was back in 1950 when television was new, and Bruce had no idea how it worked. His scientific epiphany came when he realized that in order to teach how something works, you first had to understand it. Bruce's fascination with science led him to Harvard, where he did graduate work in Paul Doty's laboratory on the physical chemistry of nucleic acids. In 1960, he embarked on a series of ambitious experiments to figure out how a cell replicates its DNA when it divides into 2 daughter cells. The results were equivocal, and to Bruce's consternation, a group of distinguished Harvard professors at the very last moment did not approve his degree. Julia Child suffered a similar fate at the Cordon Bleu cooking school in Paris. In her final exam, one instructor failed her because she didn't know that an œuf Malay was a soft-boiled egg. Undaunted, Julia spent the next several months perfecting her French, retook the exam, and got her diploma. Like Julia, Bruce persevered, did 6 more months of experiments, and got his degree. The traumatic wake-up call on a crimson carpet propelled Bruce to become a great biochemist. In the 1960s, DNA was thought to be replicated by a single enzyme, DNA polymerase. No one guessed that the enzyme would be only one component of an elaborate machine formed from multiple interacting proteins, each with a different function. Bruce developed new affinity chromatography methods for DNA and protein that allowed him to identify and purify the multi-protein machine that governs DNA replication. This work became the prototype for other protein machines in the cell, such as those that splice RNA and secrete hormones. In the 12 years after his Harvard wake-up, Bruce underwent a miraculous transformation. He had now become one of the leading biochemists in the world, and in 1976 he took over the chair of biochemistry at the University of California in San Francisco. Here he perfected his skills as a teacher, mentored young faculty members, and began to dream up innovative ways to connect working scientists with public school teachers. But probably most important of all, Bruce teamed up with 5 other scientists to write the most influential textbook of its kind, Molecular Biology of the Cell. The first edition was published 32 years ago in 1984 when Bruce was 47 years old, the exact same age as Julia Child when her first book appeared. Like Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Molecular Biology of the Cell has been a dazzling success. It is now in its 6th edition, has been translated into 11 languages, and has been devoured by tens of millions of students, as well as established researchers, all of whom praise it for its clarity, logic of its explanations, and splendid illustrations. Even though the current 6th edition has 7 authors, the material is integrated in such a way that it reads like the work of a single hand, the deft hand of the master chef, Bruce Albert. From 1993 to 2005, Bruce served as president of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. And like Julia, who used public television as a bully pulpit to raise the food consciousness of the American public and enhance sophistication of their appetites, Bruce used the presidency of the NAS to inform the nation of the importance of science education and to champion the role of scientists in society. Under his 12-year leadership, the NAS and its 2 sister organizations published an unprecedented 200 reports on all aspects of education from kindergarten to graduate school. In his crusade for implementing national standards for education, Bruce urged that schools quit teaching dry and deadening facts that students memorize just to pass tests. According to the Gospel of Bruce, students should be taught how to think critically, solve problems rationally, and acquire the good taste needed for a successful career in science. Recall that the Albert's philosophy actually began 66 years ago when a classroom of 12-year-olds in Glencoe, Illinois, were first exposed to the anatomical workings of a television set. Speaking of television, Julia Child literally made public television. She was the first public TV star to become an internationally known figure. Her phenomenal success was the result of 4 things: missionary spirit, boundless curiosity, endearing klutziness, and a deep desire to teach and to teach well. This sounds exactly like the perfect description of this year's Special Achievement Awardee, Bruce Albert. Bruce, congratulations.